Hello, everyone, and welcome to our District Administration Web Seminar here today, which is entitled Impact of Creativity on Career and College Readiness, which is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor here today, Adobe. Now, before we get started, I'm just going to share just a few housekeeping items with you, and then we'll get right started. If at any time you need any technical support today, just use the chat panel, which you can find on the right side of your screen on the lower end, then select on my name, which is Stephen Blackburn, and then just type in your message and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. I'm also about to submit a phone number and access code in the chat that you'll be able to dial into if you want to listen in privately or if you don't have any speakers, so look out for that as well. We will also be welcoming any questions that you have here today with a Q&A session that will be happening at the very end of this presentation. You can submit a question by using the Q&A panel, which you can find at the bottom right side of your screen near the chat, and then send in your questions to all panelists. If you don't currently see the chat or the Q&A panels, look again to the right of your screen on the lower end, and then click on the expand triangle, which is directly in front of the panel name to make sure you have access to it. Also, the last point I'd like to make, and then we'll get started. If you would like to access what you're seeing here today at a later time, you'll be pleased to know that everyone who's here and who registered will receive an email with a link to the slides as well as the archive recording. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to all of you our speakers here today. We have Tacey Trowbridge, who is the leader for Global Education Thought Leadership and Advocacy from Adobe. And we also have Donna Caldwell. And Donna is Adobe Education Senior Solutions Consultant. Hello and welcome, and thank you very much for being here today. We're excited about it.
Well, we are thrilled to be here as well. I'm excited to be able to share with you some of our work on creativity and its impact on students in schools, as well as in terms of career readiness and college readiness. I'm a former classroom teacher myself, and excited to be able to share with you some of the work and the research that we've done as we've been trying to answer some really important questions around creativity and its importance. Donna, do you want to introduce yourself quickly before we begin?
Thank you. So I'm Donna, and I'll be sharing what I've learned from students and educators who I work closely with on a day-to-day basis across education across the country as my role as a solutions consultant.
Well, fantastic. Well, welcome today. We are really thrilled to share with you what we're seeing about essential skills that help prepare your students and to make a difference in a rapidly changing world. I'm going to encourage you to ask questions, post them in the Q&A for us, share some of your experiences. We look forward to hearing from you throughout the presentation. So first of all, what we see as we look around in the world around us is that there's just a tremendous amount of change, and we only expect that to accelerate. This next generation needs to be empowered to reach their full potential. Employers need a workforce that can invent and imagine the future, and the world needs engaged and informed citizens with a vision to help solve problems and to come up with creative solutions. As we think about creativity, we just really see creation as the ultimate form of expression of learning, that when you truly understand something, you can pull together pieces and create something new. When students are empowered to create, they become more engaged, they become more intentional in their work. They're also successful learners who are better able to grasp concepts and subjects. Whether it's through a classroom project or an after-school project or building their own following on social media. As students go from being passive consumers of media to creators, they really begin to own their own story. They develop higher order thinking skills and problem-solving skills that help them realize their potential. And it's not just Adobe that sees creativity as important. There's broad agreement that these are the skills that will matter as students go out into the world. The signals from industry really couldn't be clearer. Creativity is the top on in-demand list for the second consecutive year according to LinkedIn. Companies see the value of creative skills. And it's not just that education can prepare students, we need to help students be ready to adapt to this rapidly changing world. The demand is only accelerating. For the past 8 years, Adobe's been conducting education in partnership with research organizations to understand how does our education system prepare students as they leave school with critical skills, and how much are these skills valued? What's interesting as I look back over all this research is that we've seen really strong agreement from Gen Z to educators to policymakers, and then within the workforce, that creative skills are essential and that they need to be taught in schools to prepare students for their futures. I'll start by sharing some of our research with Gen Z. We were curious about these students and how they saw their futures and the importance they placed on creativity. What was interesting to me is that they certainly see creativity as important to solve problems as we go forward. But they also think 85% of them think that being creative is going to be essential for their own personal success. When reflecting on their experiences in school, 78% of students say they learn best by doing or creating, and they wish that there was more of a focus on creativity in the classroom. And this is a study around creative problem solving. Educators and policymakers were in really strong agreement about the importance of these skills and the importance of practicing them in school, in the classrooms. And that these skills will be important for students' futures. Donna, what are you seeing as you work with districts and states? Do they echo some of these same sorts of perspectives?
They do. We've seen a lot of this, that the data really supports what I've seen before that the data came out, and what I'm currently seeing across several state and district commitments to digital literacy. For example, preparing students for the current job market was one of the driving motivations for Utah's partnership with Adobe for implementing Creative Cloud for all public school students grades 7 through 20. K through 6 were also included with access to another more easier entry-level application called Adobe Express. I really think that the driving motivation of the changes, we're going to talk more about this too, the job market, but with the significant increase in technical and creative industries that were moving into Utah, the state wanted their students to be those qualified candidates for those new careers instead of out-of-state graduates coming over. Most recently, New Mexico just joined Adobe in a partnership for Adobe for K through 12 public education. And they too are seeing this influx of industry. Some of this is even focused on the movie industry, entertainment fields, such as, Netflix moving into New Mexico, but they're also seeing more high-tech companies coming in. And New Mexico wants their students, which New Mexico includes just really a diverse population, to have the best opportunity to fill those positions.
That's interesting, Donna. It reminds me of a recent study I saw from the Otis School, where they focused primarily on the creative economy in California, just to understand its importance to the state and then the opportunities for students. And one of the things that really struck me was the average annual salary of someone entering the creative industry was twice as high as someone entering the general industry in California. And that's, I think, a really striking strength of this industry, that we've got tremendous opportunities for students within the creative industry itself, which is what you would typically think of. It's film, it's graphic design, it's fashion, it's the arts. We look at this also much more broadly. As we think about the impact on careers, it's hard to imagine an industry, a company, a field, a nonprofit that doesn't need a website, that doesn't have a video that helps tell their story. And so when we look at the opportunities for students, not only are they within this powerful creative economy, but they're really in every industry.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to talk about a kind of exciting project that we've worked on over the last 2 years. While we believed that creativity matters and see broad agreement across both industry and education, we wanted to know, was it possible to quantify the value of essential creative skills? And this spurred a research project where we partnered with Civitas Learning and with LinkedIn to understand and measure the impact of creative skills. So as I came to this, my experience told me that creativity spurs emotional development, it engages hard to reach students, it's an essential skill. But I wanted to know if we could quantify this and see how much does it matter and in what ways. And so that's the work that we undertook. Donna, before I dive into this, we got interested in this research in part because of what we'd heard from our customers, from educational institutions. Do you want to share a little bit about what you've seen in statewide programs that helped inform our work, or at least spur us to move forward on it?
Absolutely. I think the student success we saw in one state in particular, Idaho, which is one of our oldest K through 12 partnerships across the state, speaks to really all the benefits that we see here. Idaho kind of took a slightly different approach by focusing on certification as it began to adopt Creative Cloud into middle and high school for several reasons. One, when they first started this, there wasn't data that we have now that we're seeing coming out, much more robust data that really shows these benefits and quantifies them. So the state, with their investment, really wanted something that they could use to help validate their partnership. Also, certification provided students with a document, and with their projects, it really helped them gain skilled work opportunities directly out of high school. In a state where often that's the choice that students make. But for those who wanted to go on to higher ed, they also were given a much better foundation to pivot and make those changes. But in addition to this, some of the other things that they discovered are some of these other benefits that we're seeing here on the screen. One, by doing and creating, as Tacey was previously mentioning some of the research, teachers found that students became far more engaged in their projects, and consequently, they saw higher evaluations. Students also gained a really, we refer to this often as a creative confidence, which encouraged them to master more complex tasks and tools because they were excited to see the results of their creativity. They wanted to see the manifestation of their creative ideas. They were really much more self-driven to continue to learn. Also, the confidence that many of these students felt provided validation for some of these students for the first time in their lives. I think this was the one part of our communication with Idaho that was really the most motive for us. We saw the stories and the students telling their stories about how this confidence spilled into their personal lives and often influenced a dramatic and positive change in their personal choices. So moving on from there, Tacey, can you speak more about the studies and how they expand on these benefits?
Yeah, absolutely. As we dove into this research project with Civitas and LinkedIn, we found that creative skills really did provide significant benefits to students and to their institutions. Grades improved, retention improved, and so did both initial job prospects and long-term career trajectories. So, to give you the headline up front, what we saw was that not only did creative skills help students perform better when they were in school, they also added measurable benefit and value to student degrees, providing them with a competitive advantage that served them throughout their career. Those with creative skills earned more in their first jobs. They also were promoted faster and saw greater salary growth over time across a huge range of job functions and industries. And I'll dive in a little bit deeper and just share some of the results that we saw from the University of Texas, San Antonio. They worked with Civitas to look at all of their student data. And so they were trying to compare apples to apples, to take students who were in a history class or a science class or a math class, who were doing traditional performance and activities, with students who were in those same sorts of classes, same level classes, but they were doing an assignment that involved digital literacy and creative skills. And what we found when we compared those groups of students is that students who were exercising their creative skills earned 4.5% higher rates of A and B grades, which represented the mastery, what they'd learned in the courses. We also saw that same group of students had 8% higher course grades overall. They experienced a term GPA increase, that's a 0.2 on their 4-point scale. And then they also saw an increased persistence. They were 8% more likely to enroll for the next term. These were the measures that really mattered to higher education institutions, and I think these same sorts of measures focused on student learning, on student persistence, are really critical in the K-12 space as well. Then, while there was this overall benefit in course grades of 8%, some segments saw even greater benefits. The benefits were 2.2 times higher for Black and African American students and 2.4 times higher for first-term students. That means for both of those groups, they saw a greater than 16% increase in their course grades. And then exciting that also was that the lowest performing students, often a segment of students that are hard to move, they also saw a greater impact when they were using digital literacy and creative tools in their classes, 1.7 times that 8% that course that students saw overall. Really exciting. I think this raises all sorts of questions, and I think the next research questions are right here. Why does this make such an impact for particular populations of students? And what are the things that we can do to help ensure that all students really have opportunities to excel, to learn, and to have long-term career success?
Yeah,
go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, I was just going to say these are 3 examples of some partnerships that for differing lengths. For instance, Idaho was probably joined this partnership with Adobe about 6 years ago. It's grown significantly. Utah in the last 4 years and Fulton County in the last year. As I mentioned earlier, Idaho focused on certification, not just for the validation that they needed for this digital literacy commitment, but also for the personal validation that students felt when they achieved the certification. Now, Utah took a slightly different approach to that. They didn't focus as much on certification as cross-curricular. So they wanted their students, regardless of whether that was a math student, a science student, an art student, they wanted them to have these same skills and not focus strictly on sometimes what we refer to as core creatives. And for Utah, it was really that economic development, right? Utah has, as I was saying, has seen this large increase of technical companies moving into their state, and they wanted their students to have those jobs, not those who were coming, graduates from other states coming in. The other unique thing about their situation was they chose to provide access to Creative Cloud for grades 7 through 20. So at the exact same time, they provided these tools and these initiatives across middle school, high school, and college. They wanted to have a more seamless learning path as the students transitioned from high school to college. Also, for those students who are concurrent enrolled students, those students who are enrolled in both high school and college courses at the same time, which I'm seeing quite a bit more of instead of students taking AP classes. This also positioned those high school students for higher success because they were gaining this digital foundation that they could leverage as they moved into college. Now, Fulton County was also similar in many of their reasons why they wanted to join in this partnership. They're one of the largest school systems in Georgia, and they stated in their conversations that they were recognizing that within this really fast changing digital world, one of the most critical lessons that educators can pass on to their students is how to become creative communicators and problem solvers. Now, each one of these conversations or a group of conversations that I've had with statewide initiative and partnerships, county and city, many of them have a very different set of priorities, which really made them move in that direction. But what I find interesting is all of them had some common initiatives that they talked to us about. And I'm just going to go through 3 of these. One was transferable skills. The creative confidence and problem solving skills that these students experienced, and I've referred to this earlier as, transferable skills, was something that they wanted, as I said, across the curriculum. And I think an example of this are some comments that a physics major at Cornell University made. She said, quote, that that's why the transition from studying media communication in high school to becoming a physics major in college wasn't a big change as it was to some of her other fellow students that had not had that previous experience. She went on to discuss how her experience in digital media had really changed her concept of physics, let her see new insights, whether it had to do with colors or research. But she also mentioned that when she was required to do some collider accelerator research at a national laboratory, it required her to learn two completely new complex computer programs. And she said that she really didn't have a problem getting up to speed within just a few days because she related the programs that she had already knew, that she had already worked through her digital media to these new programs.
That's so interesting, Donna. I want to pick up on what you'd said about certifications because there's some really great research about certification that the state of Florida has done. They were tracking and comparing how students with certifications did in terms of their attendance rates, in terms of their graduation rates, their grade point average. And one of the connections is that students who have earned certifications do better on all of those measures. They show up to school more often. They're more likely to graduate. And what we've heard anecdotally from teachers we've talked to in Florida, that part of what that does for students is it connects what they're doing in school to a real world project. It gives them an opportunity to apply their learning and also a vision of what a career could look like. So Florida's done this research for at least the last 8 years. That's as long as I've been looking at it. And really, I'm really interested in the kinds of impact that these opportunities can create for students to help them envision a future and to gain skills that they know will serve them as they go on to be communicators, whether it's in physics or in any other format.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we see this quite often, especially like I said in Idaho, where we heard stories of students once they got that certification, they were taking it down the hallway, showing it to friends, to other teachers, just feeling confident, energized, engaged, and wanting more as they went through. I wanted to move to a second point, and this came up often too in our conversations within these partnerships, and that is addressing the unknown future of jobs. We don't even know what new careers are going to exist in the next even 5 years. And I find this has always been something in the last 7 or 8 years that our college students talk about, that they don't even know what job they may be in their next second or third job because it doesn't even exist yet. But what I'm seeing more recently are even students in the primary grades who are focused on building their brand. Twice, just in the last month, I heard from teachers that they had a fourth grader and a fifth grader who were wanting to build brand elements. They wanted to build a logo and something that people would identify with them because they're already passionate about becoming the future YouTubers. They feel that this is a viable occupation where they can take advantage of their digital skills and their creativity, as well as things that they're passionate about. This kind of made me think of one of the comments that the instructional technologist at Fulton said, and that is that creativity is essential for all students. How are students going to pivot to these new careers? Most likely, many of these are going to be driven by technological changes. And if they're not active content creators and problem solvers, how are they going to be really a viable part of that workforce? The other thing that comes up often is how are they going to continue to contribute to the workforce instead of being replaced by the increased amount of automation that often replaces non-creative tasks? And Casey, I think you had a study that related to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we hear really similar things when we talk to hiring managers, when we did an analysis of 2 million resumes and 2 million job postings. And what we see is this same sort of concern. How do I build a workforce for the future? I know there's going to be a lot of change. I need to hire people who come in ready and who are comfortable. They have that kind of digital agility to be able to learn something new and communicate in using modern tech tools and technologies. But they're really looking for the flexible thinkers. We did a qualitative study in conjunction with that quantitative work around the 2 million resumes. And what we heard from people who worked in fields like data science is that they were looking to hire people not just for the job in front of them, but for the job they're going to have tomorrow. And some of what that means is that they need this ability to flex, to change, to think creatively, to bring together new sets of information. So what Donna's seen when she in this work with these states is absolutely echoed by what employers are looking for and issues that they're concerned about. IBM did a really interesting study with CEOs asking what was the issue that kept them up at night. It was workforce. It was having a workforce that was really ready for the kind of change they knew they were facing.
Yeah, I'm going to pivot real quickly to the last point, though it was probably one of the most important points that we were involved in discussing with so many of these partnerships, and that is equity of access. Most of the state and school systems that we made this partnership with for their commitment to digital literacy included students of really diverse populations from different economic and ethnic backgrounds. And providing this equity of access really means that all students have that opportunity to be an integral part of this future workforce that Tacey's talking about in the studies, that CEOs want to make sure that they have access to these types of students, and not just those students who right now in their education time span can afford technology today. And I think this also relates to some of the comments that Tacey made earlier about how sometimes students that traditionally had not done as well, when they are given this opportunity to attack projects more creatively through digital literacy, they excel more due to this opportunity that for once maybe they have a chance to be validated, they have a chance to use their creative skills because they're given this opportunity to have those tools in these relationships.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about this with the LinkedIn study results too. But I wanted to say that I think one of the things that we're seeing is we know what skills help someone get ahead. And it's these essential skills. These are the skills that show up at the top of all of the lists from the World Economic Forum to The Economist. And as we think about equity, I think it's really essential that we prepare all students with the kinds of skills that are in demand. Automation is a huge challenge also to think about what jobs are going to exist in the next decade, in the next 4 years. It's hard to predict. And so the best thing we can do to prepare students for this future is to help them be effective learners, to be effective communicators, to be creative problem solvers, so that what they take with them are skills that will help them as the job market changes, as employment changes, and as they're thinking about their work shifting even a couple years into their job, their work may look quite different. So those are the skills that we really see in high demand. And I think that's also a real equity issue, that all students need an opportunity to be able to be successful in a changing world. Well, with that, I'm going to jump into a little bit more and Donna, let you talk more about some of the trends that you're seeing as you listen to educators and students.
Thanks. We see several of these trends, what we hear listed across this slide, and I've addressed several of them. From engagement, one of my favorite examples is a student that we were talking with last year who was midterm. She had already finished one of her projects. This was a science project, but she was given access to more digital assets and tools that she didn't have when she was creating that project. She petitioned her teacher to be able to redo the project and resubmit it, even though she was not going to get necessarily a better grade. But what she wanted to see was the results of that additional digital creativity that she could apply to this project. And I think that's really representative of so many of the things that we are finding where students are having more deeper learning outcomes by either using this different type of media, through using different modalities. Another example that we are finding students are this really addresses the deeper learning outcomes, that by having to address different modalities of audiences, they are learning more about how that content needs to be massaged. So for example, they do research on a particular topic, but depending on what type of modality they're going to deliver that content through, whether it's a podcast or an article or a video, they have to take into consideration how that content that they are creating is going to convey the research that they did. That has been absolutely fascinating to me. Another part of this is I feel that I'm seeing evidenced really across all subjects, is the increase in collaboration. Collaboration is such an important skill in the creative process and in problem solving. We know this as adults in the workplace. Very rarely are we completely isolated without the benefit of collaborating with our team members or other people in our workplace. But through these digital literacy skills, students can collaborate with either a small group, across cities, across states, and even we see them collaborating across countries. They have the opportunity to share their ideas across a much larger audience and to publish essentially their ideas and their creative projects. That's the other thing that one of the most exciting parts of my job is that I have the opportunity to read and to view these videos and web microsites that students have created with their ideas. You know, when I was in college, my ideas went on a paper that was typed up and then it ended up in a box that's probably sitting in my garage rotting today. You know, I really did not have the ability to pull together different types of media to convey my ideas in a stronger fashion. And I think this also is empowering students to take these skills outside of school into their community. One of my favorite examples of this is in California, very close to home. Students who had developed these skills created a video to help give hope and support to a community that was completely devastated by fire in Paradise, California. And to me, I get really passionate about this because to me, this is the ultimate indicator that these students have gained enough confidence that they feel empowered to take these schools and pivot from responding to, let's say, a school assignment prompt to creating something to address a real life problem, regardless of the magnitude of that problem. During the pandemic, we saw so much of this where students took it upon themselves to start publishing videos and articles with media that talked about social justice, that talked about changes of ideas. And it was just incredibly, really humbling to me to see these students attacking problem solving with the empowerment that they had gained.
Those are such great examples, Donna. Thank you. I think really having students be empowered and to have a sense that they can make a difference and to apply what they're learning to whatever circumstance they're in I just think really, that speaks well. That's powerful. Well, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the research that we did around the world of work and the impact of these skills in work. What we saw with LinkedIn, they looked at all of their profiles globally, and they compared recent graduates who had listed creative skills as part of their profile versus those who didn't. And what they saw was that recent graduates earned up to 16% higher salaries when they listed creative skills. They also saw that they were twice as likely to be in a category LinkedIn calls young and upwardly mobile, which essentially means that they were more likely to have a higher title or to have been promoted. And these benefits extend beyond just their first job. We also looked at professionals broadly, and again, across all of LinkedIn's profiles. And we looked at professionals as they were changing jobs. So they were well into their career, but what we saw when comparing the professionals with creative skills versus those without, LinkedIn found that having creative skills was correlated with a 2 to 3 times higher salary growth when changing roles across, and you can see this wide range of industries from aerospace to transportation. And two stand out to me. One is hospitality and the other's e-learning, where users who didn't have creative skills and were changing jobs actually saw a decrease in their salary. And this was done during the pandemic, a time when both hospitality and e-learning were in tremendous change. E-learning just exploded, and the need for people who knew what they were doing really mattered, but also could be creative and solve the problems that we were facing in the pandemic. And hospitality, again, that if you had creative skills, you were much more likely to be a desirable candidate and to see a greater salary increase. Then, as I've shared some of this research, I've referred to a number of different studies and would love to invite you to dive deeper. These are all published. We share the results of these. There's so much rich information that provides compelling evidence that these skills matter to students, they matter to educators, they matter in the job market. So we'll share these links with you in a follow-up email, but wanted you to be aware that these studies are all available for you to dive into. I'd love to hear what you think about them. So now we'll take a minute to explore how this all applies to you. Are you teaching creative skills? What does that look like in your institutions, and how can we help? So what I'd like you to do first is just take a moment to think about these big picture questions. What will your students be known for? As you think about your students going out into the world, how are you preparing them? How will they be recognized for having the kinds of skills that will help them be successful? And then this second question, how are you preparing students for a world that we can't see yet? How will you make sure that students have skills that will last and will help them not just in their first job or as they get into college, but throughout their careers? So we've posted some poll questions, mostly because we're interested in getting a sense of how you think things are going. Do you feel great about the way in which you're preparing students for a changing world? Is there more you could do? Or how about your students and how they demonstrate these kinds of skills? All right, we'll leave the poll up for a minute more just to give you a chance to respond. And I think what's interesting is that what this says to me, that students are feeling unprepared, educators are feeling their students aren't prepared enough, and employers are concerned, is that you have the real opportunity to help your students stand out, to give them not just the skills, but the confidence that they need as they go into the future. Educators agree there's not enough emphasis on creative problem solving in today's curriculum. And there are all sorts of reasons for that. Some of it is that educators may not quite know how to teach creative problem solving. It's not necessarily what they learned when they were in school. It's also that state curriculums may not include the right kind of support for educators. It could have to do with things like just the schedule, and what it looks like to do a project in your class may take more than the 50 minutes that you're allotted. What we saw when we looked at those 2 million resumes was that 3/4 of them didn't include the skills that employers valued the most. That's an opportunity to help students learn how to speak about the importance of these skills. And then 9 out of 10 employers are really concerned about this gap. And it looks like we've got the results of the survey. Thank you for those of you who answered. Preparing your students well, that's incredible. I feel grateful for that. That is going to help not just your students, but all of us. I mean, frankly, we need them to graduate well prepared. And then this question about how your students demonstrate skill and knowledge. This is a tricky one in some ways, and I think the study around resumes speaks to that. What we heard from employers, and this was evidenced in the job descriptions themselves, was that they want strong communicators, they want strong collaborators, they want creative thinkers. What showed up in the resume were hard skills. Here are the things I know how to do, rather than here's how I do them. And so I think for students to even just have the awareness that they're learning these skills, they're learning to collaborate, they're learning to communicate effectively, they're learning to express ideas creatively, and know that that's what employers are looking for. It should show up in their resume, it should show up in their conversations, their interviews. But I think even being aware that those skills matter is something that's critically important for students. So a couple of questions about how you can get started, and maybe we can close the poll results now. There's so many things that you can do, and Donna, I'll let you talk a little bit about that first piece, and then I'd love to jump in and share some of the resources that exist.
That would be great. I just wanted to kind of summarize that over the past 7 years, I've just seen such a dramatic increase in colleges that started partnering with Adobe to provide tools to support digital fluency and agility. But in the last several years, what I've seen is that this has extended down into high school and into middle school. And I think what's happening in these relationships between higher ed and K through 12 is more conversations that are finding that when students who have the opportunity before they leave high school to really gain this creative confidence, they enter college with an advantage by already having this digital foundation that they can build upon. And I I cannot tell you how exciting it's been to just see individual students, talk to them, to see schools on the whole, and of course in the statewide initiatives that I've been involved with. It's just been so amazing to watch what these students have been able to accomplish. And we are so excited to be a partner with you on this journey, whichever direction it takes you with digital literacy and agility. And Tacey, can you talk more about the resources that they can to dig deeper into this?
I would love to. Over the last 10 years, Adobe has built a learning platform for educators, the Adobe Education Exchange. With more than 1 million educators from around the world, this is a great place to come for lesson plans, for free professional development. We've got a course called Preparing Students for the Future with Essential Skills, which essentially talks about what it looks like to do this in the classroom. How do you assess creative skills? What are the kinds of opportunities to offer students? And many of these start with just a small idea, something you can easily incorporate into a math classroom, where, for example, you just ask students to give more than one way to solve a problem instead of just the answer, but to really think about the process. They can then document that process, whether that's through an animation or through video. But I think there's some really interesting ways to help students develop these skills that don't require a lot of time, that don't require completely revamping what you're doing, but create regular opportunities for students to find their voice, to gain confidence in their ability to solve problems, and perhaps to wrestle with some of the questions that we don't know the answer to yet. And that in itself will help them develop the kinds of skills that prepare them for the future. We're also offering some really fun and easy to use monthly challenges for students and educators that are a way just to begin to express themselves using visuals, using an infographic, and to share really important ideas. These are all available on Adobe Express, so they're easy to use, they're web-based, and a great way just to get started and to have somebody else help with coming up with a project or an idea, but that will help your students develop some of their critical skills. Then we'd also love to invite you to join us. Wherever your journey takes you, know that we are here and are interested in both learning from you and providing opportunities for you to hear from plenty of folks around the world who are teaching creativity and digital literacy skills in their classrooms. In July, we're hosting a free education summit where teachers, educators, coaches, and leaders will be sharing their work, how they've done it, the outcomes that they've seen. We invite you to join us. We'd love to see you there.
All right, perfect. Well, it looks like we've come to the Q&A portion of our webinar today, where all of you are participants. You can now send in your questions so Tacey and Donna can answer them live on the air. If you haven't already, you can send in your questions, and you can do that by accessing the Q&A panel that we have right there on the bottom right hand of your screen here. It's the option next to the chat button. If you don't see it, there should be 3 dots or an ellipses next to the chat button. Click on that, and that should bring you to the Q&A panel. And actually, I am going to move us back to the previous slide just because one of our participants was asking. They were interested in this image here of, how you made those surrounding colors around those 3 students. Speaking of creativity, they were wondering if you could provide some insights on how you did that.
Actually, that's so interesting that you brought that up because Tacey was mentioning some challenges that Adobe sends out if you get on the email list, and it's just really easy challenges that you can do to enhance your message, your story. And the one that just came out recently was, I noticed because I always look through those, that it tells you exactly how to do that. So as we're answering questions, let me see if I can find that link, and you can just go there. We're using this a lot in a lot of our slide presentations, and I really like it. And I think students think that it's really fun too, to be able to cut themselves out and add that.
Yeah, there was a great, the very first challenge was an infographic challenge. Essentially, it was to take a picture of yourself and then you can easily cut out the background and tell us something that's important to you. You are known for this. These are the pieces that I've learned these particular things. I'm an expert in this area. Really interesting way for students to introduce themselves to the class and for a teacher to share who they are as well. But it was wonderfully fun to do. I did it with my 10-year-old. So I feel really confident that these are things that are set up for success, help you focus on the storytelling, on what's really important, and teach you some communication skills as you're going.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that you did that with your 10-year-old. We actually had several people on our team who did it amongst ourselves just to learn a little bit more about what they do. And it's just a really fun project, very easy to do. I think it was an Express template, right, Tacey, that you could
That's
just
right.
go ahead and remix yourself.
Awesome. Perfect. And this next question that came in, pretty broad, so I'm excited to hear your answers on this. How can students demonstrate essential creative skills?
That's a good question. And some of the traditional measures we have of student learning don't help us with that. So a standardized test is not a great way to demonstrate these skills. I think college admissions process can be really challenging. Through the Common App, there are options to include a portfolio or to share, but it's really incumbent on the student to tell those stories. And so I think as we send students out into the world, one of the things I've seen used with great success is a portfolio, and that can happen in any different ways. I think we have some tools that I think are really good at that, but it could be simply a collection of student work, but that's shared publicly, that's visible, and it's curated. So a way for students to demonstrate, here's what I've done, not just what I know, but what I've done, and to include some commentary about where you struggled, where you saw particular strengths. I think about that statistic around resumes where students, their skills didn't show up in the resumes. To think about the kind of language that you use, the words that you use to describe what you've learned matters, as well as the kind of work that you've done. So I think there's some just exciting work around portfolio. Many of you are probably already doing that within your districts, but look for those opportunities for students to share what they've done, to be able to also talk about what that experience was like is really critical.
Perfect. Thank you. And now before I go to my next question, just like to say to our audience that we still have some time. So if you have any questions for Tacey or Donna, please submit them by going to the Q&A panel, which again, you can access by going to the lower right-hand side of your screen, clicking on the three dots, then click on Q&A, and then send in your questions. Thank you. So this next question that we have here, what are some resources do you have to help teachers include, the teaching of creative skills in their classrooms?
Yeah, I'm going to point you to the Adobe Education Exchange as a great place to find all sorts of resources. You can sort by subject matter, by grade level. They're just a tremendous wealth of resources that are designed to help you get started in teaching creative and digital literacy skills. There's some great courses that educators can enroll in. They are set up so that it's relatively easy to transfer them to meet requirements that you know how long they're going to take, what the learning outcomes will be, and whether you've passed the course or not. But those courses are often a great way for educators to dive into a topic that's of particular interest to them, whether it's something that's general, like teaching these kinds of skills, or whether it's about how do I incorporate video in my classroom? What would that look like in an English classroom or a history classroom? So a fantastic place to go for resources.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Well, it looks like those are all the questions that came in for us today. That said, as I go through my closing slides in just a few moments, to our attendees who are still listening, please feel free to continue submitting them when they come to mind. And so DA will be sharing those questions that you send to Adobe at some point later today so that they can get to your questions privately afterwards. So as I said, as I go through my closing slides, if any questions come to you, please feel free to submit them. But first off, thank you again, Tacey and Donna, for your time here today. And of course, thank you to Adobe as well. And to you, our audience, I would also like to thank you for joining us here today as well. For those of you who particularly enjoyed what you saw here today, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by us here at District Administration, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, as well as trends and current issues in K through 12. We have a wide range of readers who subscribe for us for free to DA, and they stay up to date with us online, as well as our print magazine, our newsletters, as well as web seminars like this one. Also, if you would like to watch this web seminar again, or for those of you who believe, that what was talked about today would be helpful to your colleagues, as I'm sure you feel that way, you'll be pleased to know that our team here at DA will be sending you an email later at some point tomorrow with an on-demand recording of this web seminar and the link to the slides. So with that, on behalf of District Administration, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone. Take care, be well, and stay safe. Thank you very much.